welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are embarking on a pretty exciting project together. We're going to build your fundamental Python toolkit literally from the ground up. And I want you to think about this process exactly like constructing a physical workshop. I mean, you wouldn't just start hammering things together without a plan, right? You need the right space, the raw materials, a solid blueprint, and eventually an assembly line to get your products out the door. Well, that is exactly how we're going to approach learning these Python essentials today. So, here is our blueprint for the explainer. First, setting up your workshop. Second, gathering Python standard data types. Third, making decisions with if-else. Fourth, automating tasks with loops. And finally, number 5, file processing in Python. All right, let's dive right into section 1, setting up your workshop. This is that very first quick step where we essentially just get the keys to the building so we can get to work. Look, before you can write a single line of code, you obviously need a place to do it. So the very first step to setting up your programming environment is installing Anaconda. And once you've got that installed, you'll need to spend a little time getting used to the Spyder interface, updating your preferences, tweaking your settings. Think of it just like arranging your workbench so your tools are exactly where you need them. Okay, workspace is set up. Let's move on to section 2, Python standard data types. Time to gather our raw materials. Every workshop needs basic materials, wood, nails, glue. In Python, our simple materials are variables. First off, we have numbers. Python supports whole numbers, called integers, like the number 9, but it also supports decimals, which are called floating point numbers, like 9.0. Next up, strings. This is just text. You define a string by enclosing it in either single or double quotes. So you could write Kai is a fine boy in double quotes, which is super useful if you need to use an apostrophe inside the text itself. And finally, we have booleans. These are basically simple on-off switches. They can only ever be true or false. So once we have those individual pieces of data, we need containers to hold them, right? And this brings us to our very first multi-item container, lists. A list is a sequence of elements, and every element is indexed. Imagine a list of class representatives, Eugene, Vera, Kay, and Anita. Because a list is flexible, we can actually perform operations on it. Want to add someone? Use the append operation, like classreps.append richlove. Need to remove an element? Use delete, like del class reps bracket 4. We can even instantly check how many items are in our container, just by asking for the length, using len class reps. Now let's see how this builds into our next concept, which are tuples. At first glance, tuples look exactly like lists. They're sequences of elements, they're indexed, but there is a massive difference here. And this is a crucial point. Lists are mutable, meaning their elements can be updated, deleted, or appended. Tuples, they are completely immutable. Once you lock in a tuple, say a list of names reading Kay, Scully, and Jeffrey, those elements absolutely cannot change during program execution. No way. So why would you want that? Well, their immutability makes them significantly faster to process. They are for sure the best choice when you're passing data between systems and you need that transfer to be rapid and secure. Which brilliantly illustrates our final data container, dictionaries. Imagine you have an address. If you stored it in a simple list, you'd have to memorize that index 0 is the street, index 1 is the city, and so on. Honestly, that's a headache. Dictionaries solve this by acting as a collection of key-value pairs. For instance, the key street maps directly to the value Tarkwa-Bagoso Highway. The key city maps to Tarkwa. This means you can access your data directly using the key names, which are case-sensitive, by the way, without ever needing to keep track of a numerical index. It's a real game changer. With our raw materials and containers completely sorted out, let's step up to the drafting table for section 3, making decisions with if-else. Let's look at the actual blueprints of our workshop. In programming, your code needs to make decisions on its own. We achieve this using if-else statements, which are essentially decision-making forks in the road. An if statement is strict. It's only going to execute a specific block of code if the specified condition is actually met. But what if it's not? Well, that is exactly where the optional else clause comes in. The else statement steps in and executes its own block of code whenever the initial if condition evaluates to false. This basically allows your program to dynamically react to whatever data it's handling. And now that our program can make decisions, we move to section 4, automating tasks with loops. This is where we build the assembly line of our workshop to automate those tedious, repetitive tasks. Let's trace the pathway for our first type of loop, the while loop. You enter the loop and immediately hit a test condition. If that condition is true, the program dives into the body of the while loop and executes the code. But it doesn't just stop there. the pathway loops right back around to the test condition again. A while loop will relentlessly repeat this block of code over and over and over until that test condition finally evaluates to false. Only then does it terminate and let the program move on.
Now, contrast that with the for loop. Instead of just waiting around for a condition to become false, a for loop systematically processes items in a known sequence. Remember our lists, strings, and tuples from earlier? A for loop will grab the first item, run the body of the loop, and then check. Hey, was that the last item in the sequence? If false, it loops back and grabs the next item. It iterates over the sequence methodically until it hits the final item and the check evaluates to true, successfully terminating the loop.
All right, we have reached the final section of our explainer. Section 5, File Processing in Python. Your data has been processed on the assembly line, and now it's time to send it out. Welcome to the shipping and receiving department. Handling a file in Python has a very definitive life cycle, and you really have to follow the steps in order. First, you must open the file and assign it to a stored variable, also known as a file object. For example, you might create a variable called citytemp and use the open function to open citytemp.csv. Once it's open, you move to step 2, where you use specific methods to read from or write to the file. And finally, step 3, which is absolutely critical, you must close the file. Now, when you open that file in step 1, you have to tell Python exactly what your intentions are, using a specific mode. R is for read, which is the default. If the file doesn't exist, you'll get an error. A is for append, which lets you just add data to the end, and it will helpfully create the file if it doesn't exist yet. W is for write, which also creates the file if needed, but watch out, it overwrites existing data. And X is strictly for create. If the file already exists, it'll throw an error to protect you from accidentally overwriting it. Once you have the file open in the right mode, you use these crucial methods. Use readline to read just one single record, or read lines to pull all the records starting right from where your cursor is positioned. If you're in write or append mode, you use the write method to add your text. But guys, the absolute most crucial point here, the thing you must remember, is the close method. You should always explicitly close your files. Why? Because due to something called buffering, the changes you just made might not actually show up until you properly close it. Don't let your hard work literally disappear into the buffer. And there you have it, the whole shebang. You've set up your workspace, gathered your basic data types, learned how to control logic with if-else statements, automated your tasks with loops, and mastered saving your work through file processing. You have officially built your fundamental Python toolkit. The blueprint is in your hands now, so my question to you is, what data problem will you solve first? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy building.